Thank you, Senator Sinema. Senator Padilla, you're recognized for your questions.
So thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank you for holding this important hearing today. The companies testifying today offer users an unprecedented ability to access, consume, and distribute information. So, Mr. Chair, you're right to focus our attention on how corporate product design and investment choices influence the content that is produced and distributed. My first question for a couple of you is relative to content moderation. And we've been talking about that throughout the hearing here. Last year, Frances Haugen disclosed that at Facebook, 87% of all spending combating misinformation on Facebook was spent on English language content, despite the fact that only 9% of Facebook's users are English speakers. She also disclosed that trust and safety investments for users in countries other than the United States were abysmal. And an audit of Twitter's disinformation and misinformation work disclosed by Peter Zacko, who testified just yesterday in Senate Judiciary Committee, found that Twitter's integrity team lacked language expertise in the countries it was serving, even though 80% of Twitter users are outside the United States. Your companies make commitments to all of your users who are not just linguistically diverse, but culturally diverse as well. Question first for Mr. Cox. In your testimony, you state that you have over 40,000 people working on trust and safety issues. How many of those people focus on non-English language content, and how many of them focus on non-U.S. users?
Sure, Senator. Happy to take your question. Our safety and security teams are deployed to help our users all around the world. Specifically on the question of misinformation, which you mentioned, we have 80 fact-checkers operating in 60 countries around the world. Those fact-checkers are certified by independent fact-checking organizations. In the United States, we have 11 fact-checkers, 6 of whom support Spanish language content. We also have partnerships with Univision and Telemundo to connect people with Spanish language authentic information around elections. We also offer an election voting center in Spanish language to Americans to help folks get authoritative information about where to vote that's tailored to their specific zip code.
Yeah, I appreciate the information you're sharing. Some that's been in your testimony, I welcome more. More is better. Do you have any idea of the breakdown of the 40,000 people I referenced? First of all, is that number roughly accurate? If it's significantly higher, let me know. If it's significantly lower, let us know. What I'm looking at is the ratio of English versus non-English. Do you have that data?
Senator, I'd be happy to follow up on the specifics of how those 40,000 folks are broken down.
Thank you. I would greatly appreciate that. Mr. Sullivan, how many members of your trust and safety team have non-English language expertise and focus on issues outside the U.S.?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Senator. As a global company, this is important to us. We have about 2,200 people working on content moderation globally. I don't have the exact breakdown, but we can take that back to our team.
Please. Ms. Pappas, how large is your trust and safety team, and how much does TikTok invest in your non-English users and, I guess, non-Western users?
I don't have those numbers at hand, but I'm happy to get back to you on those as well.
Okay. Mr. Mohan.
Senator, we have over 20,000 people that work on content moderation all over the world. We're a global platform, as you know, supporting a couple billion users all over the world, and we endeavor to enforce our policies as well as make sure that our recommendation algorithms work equally well for all speakers all over the world. We support dozens of languages on our platform in all the countries that we operate. And to give you a couple of more concrete examples, here in the U.S., our support across all those 4 R's that I described in my initial testimony are not just about English, but other languages as well. So, for example, in Spanish, our policies are enforced. We serve up information panels, not just in English, but in Spanish. Those relate to topics like elections, how to vote, where to vote, et cetera. COVID-related information, because families are looking for that content, not just in English in this country, but we recognize in a number of different languages, including Spanish.
Thank you. I'd appreciate more detail and data from all of you. Speaking of data, as some of you may or may not know, my background is in engineering, so I am a big believer in data-informed and data-driven policymaking. In reviewing your testimony, and appreciate the data, some of the data that you did provide, especially around dangerous content found on your platforms, have, whether it's incomplete or a desire for additional data, let me just jump into a couple more questions. Mr. Cox, in your testimony, you say that Meta found and removed 95% of hate speech content before it was ever reported. Of the remaining 5%, how many users were recommended the content in their newsfeed? Do you have data along those lines?
Senator, I can offer data on prevalence, which would be the amount of content that appears across the averages of the content on our platform. So for hate speech, the prevalence in our last report is 0.02%, or 2 out of every 10,000 pieces of content.
Right. But you see where I'm going, right? 95% is a good number. The 5% that you didn't catch before it was reported, if it was recommended, 1, 2, 3, 5 times, that's one thing. If it's recommended tens of thousands of times or more, that's a different dynamic. That's what we're trying to get at. And if you don't have the data at your fingertips, follow up would be welcome.
Senator, we'd be happy to follow up on that.
Great. Ms. Pappas, in your testimony, you say that 88.4% of removals under TikTok's violent extremism policy occurred within 24 hours of being posted. Again, a good number, but it's not 100. For the other 11.6%, do we have a gauge of how long it took to find and resolve those items?
No, I'd have to get back to you on that. But similarly, we look at, the prevalence of content that would be violative, and for violent extremism, it was 0.01%.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, my time is up. Similar to Senator Sinema, I'll have some additional questions I'll submit for the record.
Very good. Thank you, Senator Padilla.